I mute my mic.
Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday and it's been a minute. It's time to get back to Notary Nerds Book Club, and that's what we're doing this Saturday morning. We've had a busy summer. July was just full of all kinds of exciting things. We had our mock loan signing event. So for a couple of Saturdays, we weren't able to get to our book club. And then football, jamborees and stuff kept me from engaging last Saturday. So this Saturday, we are back on track. Every Saturday morning, we try to get together at 9 o'clock until 10 o'clock at Notary Nerds to read because we're nerds. That's what we do. This is going to be our fourth or fifth book. I can't remember which. We've been reading since last fall. Things that stimulate our minds in the entrepreneurial space and reinforce those things that we need to do mindset-wise in order to have a successful business. The last book we read, Who Moved My Cheese? If you haven't read it, you really want to invest in it. Just a quick, easy read. Before Who Moved My Cheese, we were in Robert's Rules of Order. It was kind of dry, kind of hard to read, so we put that on pause. Before that, Think and Grow Rich. Before that, How to Grow Your Business with LinkedIn by Bill Soroka and his co-author. And then before that, Notary Best Practices. So when you plug into Notary Nerds, you have the opportunity to join this book club. It's free. It's for anybody who wants to be there. Today, we're starting out with the discussion on Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It was very important to me to reread the introduction because it points out a very stark reality that we all need to face. And I'm going to see if anybody else picked up on it before I give it away. Did anybody else get what I got or get the aha from reading the introduction? Anybody? Feel free to come off of mute. Anybody get anything really interesting from just the reading of actually not the introduction. Let's start at the acknowledgments because I reread that as well. There was something I pulled out of the acknowledgments. And since I don't have any hands going up, I'm going to go ahead and give you what it was. He listed no less than 24 names. He listed no less than 24 names of people who helped him. A lot of us are trying to do what we are trying to do on an island unto ourselves. It cannot work that way, folks. He listed, this is revelation number 1 in his acknowledgments. And there's a lot of people who you find that have acknowledgments and thank yous and things like that. There may be a couple, 2 or 3, right? He listed no less than 2. This whole paragraph is bunches of people. So lesson number 1, build your team. Start to network with those people. Start to interact with those people who could be a part of your team, okay? That can help you, people who are smarter than you in certain areas, okay? That was number 1. Let's go on to the introduction. The introduction was written by his co-author, Sharon Lecter. And Sharon is an accountant by trade. And the way Sharon and Robert Kiyosaki ended up connecting is because Sharon's husband is a patent attorney. So Robert Kiyosaki has this game called Cash Flow, and the patent attorney, which is Sharon's husband, was kind of looking it over and kind of giving it a 1-2, and they decided to have this pretend game, right? Where they invited some other professionals, and I think their daughter participated in it. Well, Sharon, being an accountant, was shocked that the people that they invited to test this game didn't have the level of financial education that she thought they should have as either an attorney or a doctor or whatever profession that they were, which pointed out another very stark reality. Just because someone is highly educated, just because someone is, highly educated with lots of degrees doesn't mean they have the financial intelligence that it takes in order to be rich, okay? This book is going to challenge some of you, okay? Some of you who have grown up in a generation of go to school, get good grades, and get a job. That's all we've been taught, okay? I'll raise my hand. That was what my parents taught me. And that's what many of your parents taught you. And they taught us that because that's what they were taught, right? And there's nothing wrong with that because that's the best everybody had at the time. Well, times have changed. But as we'll learn when we start reading in chapter 1, the public education system has not changed at all. They still teach the same subjects for the same outcome, for people to leave there and go to work and get a job. The problem is the jobs aren't the same. We're changed. Our society and our economy is completely changed, but we're still teaching the same things, right? So that's the danger. That's the danger in things. And he forewarns in this book, which I can't remember when it was written, but he forewarns of a devastating event. And that devastating event, we're actually living in that time now where the gap between the haves and the have-nots is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And what history shows us is anytime that gap gets too big, what happens? What happens when that gap gets too big? What do the have-nots usually do when the gap between them and the haves gets too big? Anybody? Revolt, exactly. History has shown that. That's not something we're making up. That's something that any of us can go and verify from facts, from history, from the historical record. So to make sure that you and your family, because you can't unfortunately save the world, only thing you can do is take the knowledge and change your own thinking, and hopefully that will impact those that are closest to you. Okay? You're not going to be able to change the world. That's not what you were sent here to do. Okay? What you were sent here to do is to take this knowledge and implement it for your own family so that you don't have to worry about that gap. Okay? Chapter 1, or actually introduction, she was talking about the need. She was talking about having a conversation with her son who realized that, hey, mom, if Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard to create Microsoft, and all of these athletes and all these different people, they don't even have a good education. Some of them are even mentally challenged and still are making $4 million a year. If these things are true, then this whole idea of me going to school and getting good grades and getting a good job, that's not going to get me rich. And the co-author had to pause and think to herself. She said, wait a minute, I'm just regurgitating what my parents had told me. But my son has a point. That is not the way you're going to get rich. You're never going to get rich working for someone. Let's go on into, anybody else got anything out of the introduction that they'd like to discuss before we start our discussion of chapter 1? Anybody? Well, let's get into it. Oh, yes, go ahead, Gerald. It's come on from, there we go.
Oh, this book, I was just going to say, this book I bought, actually I bought it to give to my children. I wanted my children to read this. I bought this, as you can see, it has the sticker on it from the bookstore. Mm-hmm. And I bought it for $1. It was in the clearance. And I did it and I read it. And I wanted to give it to my children and let them know. And my daughter right now is going to school because she wants to build her own business. She is tired of working for people. She's only 24 and she already knows to stop working for a corporation and build her own wealth. And my son is the same thing. But that was the main thing I got out of that first introduction is pass it on to your children.
Yes. Yeah. You know what? We're on the same page because like you, I went to a bargain bookstore and it's faded out now, but I paid $4.50 for mine. But I got maybe 3 or 4 copies of it because I got 4 boys. And when I was reading this again, I used to make them read it as punishment, you know? Don't read chapter 1 of Rich Dad Poor Dad, you know, when they didn't clean the dishes or something like that. And I don't know that they actually made it all the way through the book. But now, I know my oldest son and I, we read it a couple of years ago together. But now what I'm going to do, that my youngest is 13 and a little bit more able to comprehend, is I'm going to put this on the table for all of us to read as a family again, right? Because it's that important. It's very much so that important. And you don't really get it the first time you read it, I don't think. You get it, but the more you read it, the more it sets in that, hey, this is real. I can become rich. It is a process of my thinking that is going to get me there, right? It's how I think, it's what I say. Okay, some of these things are not new. There is nothing new under the sun, right? Your words hold a tremendous amount of power in saying things like, oh, I'm so broke. Oh my gosh, I'll never get out of this debt. When you say things like that, you are shutting things down from your brain being able to create solutions. All right, we'll talk about that here in a second. So chapter 1, Robert had 2 dads. He had a biological father who was very well educated, made good money, and he had a non-biological father that was the father of his friend Mike. And this father, who he calls his rich dad, was an entrepreneur. And he had several businesses, and everybody in town knew that one day he was going to be rich. But the setting of this story starts when Robert was 9 years old. Okay, him and his friend Mike were not the rich kids. Robert had the luxury of living in the right house on the right side of the street, which afforded him the ability to go to the public school that all the rich kids went to. Okay. After the 6th grade, the rich kids went off to private school, and then Robert and Mike and the other kids went to the public school. But for the 1st through the 6th grade, he was matriculating with what he calls rich kids. And what happened during that matriculation, obviously, is the rich kids would go on vacations and they weren't invited because they were poor. So that, I think, was his first revelation into the distinction of social class, is that, okay, my dad makes good money, he teaches at the university, but he doesn't have a Cadillac, we don't go on vacations, I don't have a new baseball glove. So he started to make that distinction of the difference in class at that time. So he wanted that. He wanted to be rich. And he asked his dad, he said, hey dad, how do I become rich? And his dad really didn't have an answer. He describes his dad as sitting in a chair reading a paper and taking a long time to respond to his question. But the reality of it is his dad didn't know himself. And that's another thing that is pointed out. And you guys feel free to chime in. Wealth and how to become rich is taught by parents over dinner. If your parents aren't wealthy, then you're not going to be talking about how to get wealthy over dinner. Wealth is not discussed or taught in public schools. So if you don't get it in public schools, and if you don't get it at the dinner table, then where are you supposed to get it? Okay, you're supposed to seek it out in books like these. So that's the important thing to remember, is that no one is obligated to tell you how to fix the poverty problem. The government is not going to fix it. Your friends are probably not going to be able to fix it because they're likely in the same situation as you, because we tend to surround ourselves with people like ourselves, right? That's one of our challenges that we need to do, is we need to start surrounding ourselves with people we are the average of the 5 people in our circle. We are the average intellect, we are the average wealth, we are the average everything health of those 5 people. So having a circle that reflects that you desire to be is very important. But a lot of us are intimidated by creating that circle. But anyway.
Can I jump in?
Please.
Sandra, you know what? This generation, right now, they don't believe in 30 years and out, 30 years in retirement and a pension. They believe in exactly what you're talking about, getting it for their own businesses, to build wealth for themselves and their family for generations to come.
Right.
I'm not knocking our parents, but that's what all they know. But when we can do new information, brings new results.
Amen to that. Okay. And one thing that we learned from reading Think and Grow Rich, which has some of the same principles that are being taught in this book. It starts with what you think, your thoughts. Okay, it's even biblical for those of you guys who read the Bible.
Right.
Everything starts
with the man thinking he is.
That is correct. And then when you speak it, it becomes reality. So you have to really, really, really protect what you think. because you'll end up accidentally saying it. And if it's something that's negative and bad, then you've just created your path. So you really have to really be very protective of your thoughts. But in the book, he wanted to make money. So he set out with his friend Mike to go make money. How did he make money? Somebody chime in. What was his solution to his poverty problem? Does anybody remember what him and Mike decided to do?
They were going to make their own coins.
They were going to make
melting silver. Yeah.
Thank you, Martha. They were going to make their own money. And they thought that was a genius idea. And not only did they have the idea to make the money, but back then toothpaste tubes were made out of lead, right? So they were ingenious enough to go around to all the neighbors asking for their empty toothpaste tubes. And it wasn't until his mom, Robert's mom, said, hey, look, I need this gone in a week. They had to kind of speed up production. So they're in the garage, they're melting down these toothpaste tubes, trying to get rich, okay? The ingenuity of it all, I laugh at because it's so elementary. They took action. And that's the big thing. They were 9 and 10 years old, but they had a problem and they were willing to solve their own problem. See, it's in us. I think it's in us even as kids that we come up with these solutions. For those of us who started the babysitting in the lemonade stands, we wanted money. Our parents either didn't have it to give or weren't going to just give it to us. So we had to be creative. And so we started as the babysitter. That's where it begins. But I think when we start school, they kind of push that thinking down. With that thinking, that ingenuity kind of gets shoved down, and it becomes about the grades and passing exams and things like that, which is a sad course of events. So anyway, he describes his rich dad as a man who, didn't finish the 8th grade, but yet he still had all these businesses. And he describes his poor dad as this man of high intelligence, lots of degrees, but always complaining about bills and dying, leaving bills, whereas his rich dad left millions to his family. What is the difference? What was the difference? So although both of his dads worked hard, it was his rich dad who understood that wealthy people, rich people have money work for them, and everybody else works for money. Okay.
Monica?
Yes.
I have a question, it's Martha. As you get more into the story, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but they talk about the issues of wealth being greed and fear and such, right?
Yes.
So a conflict for me is I'm concerned that the drive utilizing the word rich drives us to the greed. I wish that there was another word, because rich is what we're dealing with now, and the differential between the two. I'm not making sense, I guess, but
no, I
think
understand.
Driving everybody to want to be, quote, rich, you're missing all that in the middle of, it's not just money that you want to be rich with, but that's what people have forefront in their minds. It needs to be the richness of your whole person, not just your financial wealth. Does that make sense?
Yes, I absolutely understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah, it's not just about the money. In your opinion, it's about the totality of what wealth looks like. Doesn't just sit solely on the dollar bill or
right.
financial accounts, so to speak.
Yeah, I have his most updated version. He is 80 now, Kawasaki is, and so his updated book has little vignettes in it that talks about how it is now in 2020, I guess is when he came out with this. So it compares about what he says and what is now reality that he's observing. So it's a very interesting additions he's put in there. But that drive for wealth has produced this greed that has produced this disparity. So if we didn't drive it so toward money all the time and looked at ourselves as a whole individual perhaps we would be more wealthy as a whole,
I
and
love
not
that.
just that financial part.
I love that
I
perspective.
agree with that.
Yeah.
We've
Mm,
Yeah.
lost our soul in the midst of all this.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But
That's
you
it.
money, you don't work for the money. You work for what the money can do for you, like freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom to do other things, to take care of your family without worry, or it's not the money should drive you, is what it frees you up to do, how to
Right.
live more freely, compassionately, more lovingly, more
But when you,
forgive.
I'm sorry, I
Go
interrupted.
ahead.
Well, he says in the book that even the most wealthy have a tremendous fear that they're going to lose that wealth. So
Mhm.
they're in the same spot we are, really. They just have a bigger wallet to worry in than we do. So there's really no difference in
Mm-mm.
them as a person inside. They're just as fearful as the rest of us. So where does that leave us all?
See that I think that's the issue there. It's not so much the money. It's the fact that the people, when you get it, you hoard it, or some people hoard it, and you want to take as much as you can, thinking that's going to help you hold on to it. But I think one of the things in the Bible is they tell you when you give, it always comes back to you tenfold.
Yes.
And I really do believe that. I've always
Yes,
felt
it
that way
does.
in life. And I think that people lose that. It doesn't matter how much you have. If you continue to give and give from the heart and know that, like, lift somebody else up. You know what I'm saying? You don't just
Right.
hoard it for yourself, because a lot of the corporations these days, they want to get all these people working for them, making all that money for them. But then you don't want to give them things like health care to take care of their families and things like that. I think that's the problem. It's like a moral dilemma here. We really have lost it as people, I think, and we've allowed that money. That's where that greed comes in.
Right. We're
I
going
think
for the love of money,
right. You're going for the love
the
of
root
money,
of
but
all evil.
if you
Hmm.
make money and you give and you use that money to promote other people or to promote your community, to make sure people around you, you don't, of course, you're not going to give all your money away, but you want to make sure the people you come in contact with, you can help. And if you can't help them, you don't do anything to harm them.
Right. These are all, I love it. I love the discussion. I absolutely agree. I also want to bring it back to, at the end of the day, Robert now has, I'm going to get that revised book, Martha. Thank you for bringing that up, because his perspective has changed. When he wrote this book, he may have, he think certain things were at the forefront of his thinking. He's 80 years old now. He's revised it. He's added some vignettes to kind of supplement and supplant some of the things that he's already talked about. But at the end of the day, in our society, money is power. Power to do the things either philanthropically. Okay, you can't do any of it without some money. Can we all agree on that? Right?
Right.
You can't feed your family. You can't do any of these things. You can't do any of these things without money. Yes, Kay.
Hello. I just wanted to add to what Martha said. I think that that was very powerful in terms of, I know we're talking about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the book right now, but there's another book, The Alchemist. I don't know if you all have heard of it, but it talks about the journey of how a person is chasing their treasure, their wealth, i.e. money or whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. And in the process, they transform themselves. That journey getting to wealth transforms themselves into a different person, to where they're able to actually access that wealth now. So what you're saying, making that correlation between how people and how Robert Kiyosaki had a different perspective then to what he has now, is because it's a transformation that he has gone through. And that's the part that everybody leaves out in learning how, I mean, going through all of the ups and downs and through the journey to make it there. So I completely understand what Martha's saying as far as the mentality is concerned.
Absolutely.
Good tie-in.
Absolutely. The money is just one form of power, they say in the book, but financial education, that I think that's the crux of things. Getting the focus like off of the money and the chase of the money, but more on the acquisition of financial knowledge that allows for one to create money. And there's a term and a phrase that I have fallen in love with over the years, and that's conscious capitalism, right? A capitalist, we all know what a capitalist is, right? And I love capitalism. Thank God for capitalism. I have nothing bad to say about capitalism, but I was even more excited when I learned about the term conscious capitalism. You guys have seen these companies like Tom's, or I can't remember the shoe company, that the business model itself has philanthropic branches built in it. Every time you buy a shoe is given away. That is conscious capitalism. There is a bracelet company that when you buy a bracelet, so much plastic is taken out of the ocean. Their business model is wrapped up in conscious capital. They're working towards a goal beyond net profit to the shareholders. It goes out into a moral thing or a societal thing or an environmental thing, and they've incorporated their business model around it. We're seeing that as a trend now. And millennials specifically spend their money with companies who do that more. So capitalism is changing, folks. Companies, big corporations, they can't just put anything out there. They can't just do business any kind of way. They can't just do anything they want to with the environment anymore, because you've got people who will say, I am not going to spend money with you. I will spend money with you because when I buy my bracelet from you, I know that it's doing something good. When I buy my t-shirt from you, I know that an orphan in Haiti is being helped. You see what I'm saying? So the transition that Robert has had, I am so excited to go and read the things that have changed and compare them to here. But at the beginning of the day, we have to obtain financial literacy that allows for us, because I heard some of us talking about it, right? I think it was, is it Gerald one? That when you said, if we don't, I can't remember how you phrased it, but it was it reminded me of a little bit in the book when we were talking about the government not being able to take care of our needs and things like that. A lot of people expect and feel entitled that the government should do certain things for them, right? And that unfortunate mindset forces people to not try to figure out and come up with their own solutions. Now, there are certain members of our community who can't do that thinking, that need the government, right? But there are those of us who don't really need it, but have been raised in a society that says, go to work, let the government take all of their money out first because they need it to help you out, right? We need our roads, our schools, and all these things, right? So we go through that and we do all that, but then we have that shortage in our own finances where we can't go on vacation, or our vacation is just a trip down the road and back. We can't experience life. We don't get more time, folks, right? So everything is built on this whole, let me give the government the money so they can go do what they need to do. But see, the wealthy have figured it out. They know that if they create the money, they can do all these philanthropic things and do everything they want to do. But the goal is for the government not to get all of your money, okay? Because if you do that, then you won't ever be able to experience life at its fullest because you won't be able to fund it. We're back to the money, okay? So it's not all about the chase of the money. No, it does have moral, ethical, and all these other implementations that have to be considered. But at the beginning of the day, I had to exchange for this coffee yesterday, this day old coffee. The lady didn't just hand me that coffee because I felt entitled to it out of the drive-thru. I had to give her some money in exchange for it, okay? So we have to come up with some type of financial literacy plan and understanding mindset that we have to be creative in creating this money, not chase it like the donkey and the carrot that he talked about, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. But the ability to create it, that's where I think a lot of people are missing the boat. because we all have such amazing talents and skills that if we're forced, then we will use those skills. Let's talk about that. Let's get back to the book. Lesson number 1 is the rich doesn't work. The rich don't work for money. And he asked his dad at the beginning of the chapter, how do you get rich? And his dad, of course, didn't have a really good answer. But at the end of the conversation, his dad said, why don't you talk to your friend Mike's dad? He's got several businesses and everybody in town thinks he's going to be wealthy one day. So this was the beginning of Mike's dad's wealth journey. Mike's dad wasn't rich in this setting at the beginning. He became that way over time. So when Robert came to his dad and asked, hey, Dad, how do I get rich? His dad, with his PhDs and his tenure at the university, couldn't answer that question. He sent him over to Mike, which is his friend's dad, and that's where he began with his financial education. What's the first thing that Mike's dad did to him and Mike, to Robert and Mike? Do you guys remember? When they went to talk to him about money. Anybody?
Remember, it's about softball game.
Making them for him to meet with them and send the other employees come and go.
That part. He made them wait. He made them sit out in the lobby, and he was not in a hurry. He knew they needed something from him or wanted something from him, but he made them wait. All a part of the test. So they get into his office after waiting. I don't know how long. I think it was 45 minutes or so. And he gives them an offer. You're going to work for me 3 hours on Saturday, and I'm only going to pay you 10 cents per hour.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so they were like, wait a minute. Take it or leave it, he says. But I got a softball. Take it or leave it. I'll take it. Now Robert says in the book that 10 cents an hour was still not good money back in 1956, okay? So it was very tempting for him to just want to just do the softball and not worry about it, but he wanted the desire, the desire for the thing has to be greater than anything else in order for you to take action. Unspoken lesson number 2, and it's also one of the biggest lessons taught right at the beginning of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Desire. In the beginning of Think and Grow Rich, there was a little girl who was asking for 25 cents from a man. In that day and age, this was a little black girl, it was the white man. In that day and age, you just didn't do that. But that little girl's desire to get that 25 cents from that man was greater than the consequences that she thought she could face, that she was going to face. Your desire has to be so strong that you will not stop, okay? You will forego the other luxuries to pursue whatever it is you're going to be pursuing. They had that desire. They accepted the 10 cents per hour and they started working. Their job, dusting off cans at one of many grocery little convenience stores that Mike's dad owned. Now, let me stop right there. A lot of us were taught the phrase, a jack of all trades and yet a master of none. They never finished the quote because there's more to that quote, but a lot of us recognize that part of the quote, and we were taught, focus on one thing, get good at it, and if you're doing too much, you're doing too much. Mike's dad had 3 restaurants, grocery stores, and some other stuff at the beginning of his wealth journey. So for those of you guys who are notaries public and you have a notary business, and maybe you're an artist, and maybe you're this, and maybe you're that, don't feel as if that you are all over the place. You could be. I'm not saying that you aren't. But what I'm saying is multiple streams of income are a part of any wealth portfolio. And if somebody is approaching you and saying or making the indication that you're spreading yourself too thin and you're not getting anything accomplished, that person is probably not someone that shares the mindset that you have. And you might need to readjust your circle because they may dampen your creativity just by mere association. Okay? So it's important that your multiple streams be actually streams. Now, if you're doing 7 different things and none of them are making money, then they may have a point, right? So going back to the book, he made them sit and wait. He gave them the job at 10 cents per hour. They go to the grocery store. They work for Miss Martin, dusting off cans. And she dropped their little 10 cents into their hand or whatever. And they were just like, really? They started to feel a certain kind of way. Well, this went on for a little bit, and Robert started to complaining to his poor dad, and his poor dad said, you know what? That's wrong. He shouldn't be paying you that way. I'm going to call the child labor people. You're entitled to making more than just, you're worth more than that. How dare he mistreat you? Sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Entitlement is a very subtle thing. And if you get around enough people and you guys are all quoting the same facts, boy, I tell you, y'all can drum up a fury and everybody be feeling the same way about how everybody's doing us wrong and we need to change it. Did anybody force him to take that job? He had a choice, right? But now him and his dad, his poor dad, are sitting and they are revving each other up. I can't believe Mike's dad is a crook. He's only paying y'all 10 cents per hour. That is slave wages. He ought to be ashamed of himself. You need to go into this office and you need to demand that he pay you what you are worth. And so Robert said, you know what, dadgummit, Dad, you're right. And he got on the horn with Mike, his friend. And Mike, I need to talk to your dad because he's not paying me right and he needs to do this. And you know, I could call the child labor people on him. And Mike said, Dad said you would do this. So he told me that when you did, he wanted us to set up another meeting. Okay. So the rich dad already knew what he was doing from the beginning. He was waiting on that frustration to come out. So it came out, but I wanted to illustrate that point between the poor dad and Robert. Because so many of us have those kinds of conversations with our homegirls, our best friends, our coworkers, and we get together and we're ruffling feathers and they ought not, they better remember who we are and ... Nobody tell us to go work for them. You decided to go and apply and work for them because you were afraid of not being able to pay your bills. So you went and marched your happy butt in there and asked for a job. And then when you got that job, you didn't like how much you were getting paid because taxes came out of it first. Your ends ain't meeting. And now everything at the job is pissing you off. So you're going to go into the man's office and say what he's going to do to make it right for you because you are entitled to. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Most of the country does that. Very few people exit that mindset and come over here. This is what we're doing with this. Right? So when he met with him the second time, what happened? Did he make him wait? He made him wait again. Okay? Because you want something from me doesn't mean your sense of urgency is not my emergency. Mm-hmm. That's what people don't get. You know, I deal with it all the time in business and, you know, when I can send an email 2 weeks ago and yesterday you get the email and now you want to hurry up and let's do this. I need to get this done. Fix this. But wait a minute. Your urgency is no longer my emergency. I communicated that to you 2 weeks ago. That's in life, folks. Your urgency is not anybody else's emergency. You want to get wealthy and retire. Your job, they don't feel that same sense of urgency. Either you've got to exit from that or develop a plan around that gets you to where you want to go in the time frame you want to get there in. The point is, he made him wait, brought him in the office, and they sat down again. What's the problem? You're not paying me what I'm worth, and the child labor law. So he gave all of his grievances. And rich dad sat back and was like, okay. You know, it is what it is. What would you like to do? You know, I was waiting for you to come to this realization and it was all a part of the lesson. You said you were going to teach me. You haven't taught me anything. Matter of fact, you didn't even talk to me this whole time since I saw you last. Well, I've been teaching you, but I've been teaching you in a different way. You said you were gonna complaining, you. He says one thing: if you don't change your thinking to changing yourself instead of trying to change me, you're never gonna get it. A lot of us spend time trying to change other people. We want to go into HR and tell them how they should do things. We want to go into operations and tell them how they need to change their thing. We want to tell the people at the places where we work how to fix their mess. We want to tell everybody how to do everything. You cannot change anyone but you. You can even change your kids. I've tried, okay? It doesn't work. They're little people. They have their own thinking. The only person you can control is you. So in that meeting that Rich Dad had with Robert started to understand that, hey, I am making him to be the problem, because that's what we do societally, is we blame the rich. If the rich would pay their fair share, then a lot of us would have better roads, and we just put it all on them, okay? And don't get me wrong, I have been there, and sometimes I still feel a little bit of that, because on paper, it makes sense. Yes, if the top 1% paid their fair share of taxes, we probably wouldn't have a lot of the wants and needs that we maybe if they paid their fair share of taxes, maybe the government would just get greedy and find another way to spend it, and it still wouldn't get down to us. You know, who knows? But my point is, we societally will blame those at the top because we feel like they owe the society more, right? Let me ask everybody a quick question. If you, when you had your last windfall, let's say $5,000 or $10,000, right? Just extra. Maybe it was a tax return, or maybe you went to the lotto, or maybe you pulled some money out of somewhere. Anyway, you had 5 or 10 grand, right? How would you feel if someone said, oh, Sandra, you've got 10 grand now. Martha, you've got 15. Okay, Kay, you've got 20. We need for you to give us $5,000 of that, because you've got on average more than everybody else. How would you have responded to that, Sandra? Martha?
No way.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Okay. So why is it when we get our little bit of 5,000 or 10,000, we get the fact that, no, you better not ask me for mine. But yet, when we see somebody with millions, we think they should. Is our money not any different than theirs? Should the premise not hold true for both? Are we all not equal, right? But for some reason, wealth is demonized. And a lot of us put wealth in this category of I don't, and mentally push ourselves away from it. But we have to change our thinking. Just like what Martha was talking about at the beginning, it doesn't necessarily have to be about chasing this money and being void of humankind. It's not about that. You can have both. It's not about just hoarding the money, because like he mentions in the book, there's so many wealthy people who are emotionally miserable, trying to keep it, scared that they're gonna lose it, living in fear, the same fear we have, but a different kind, but still fear nonetheless about this money, okay? So when he sat in his office and he talked and got all of his grievances out, he was being taught and didn't understand the entire time that you have, if you're willing to accept what's given to you, then you ought not complain. That was the lesson. If you're gonna sign up for something, you sat there for 3 weeks or however long and got your 10 cents, now you're mad about it. Now you want me to change my process because it's not good enough for you. This is my show. You came to me. So letting go of that thinking of having to change somebody else to make our lives better, that's the first step, okay? After that, they waited in line. Everybody, they got their grievances out, and, he goes through all of that. And after, though, he said he had a different perspective. On page 30, it says, the poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. So he says, on this bright Saturday morning, I was learning a completely different point of view from what I had been taught by my poor dad. At the age of 9, I grew aware that both dads wanted me to learn, both dads encouraged me to study, but not the same things. So his highly educated dad gave him some advice to go to Mike's dad, but it was Mike's dad that really started to give him the knowledge, and it started with letting go of that entitlement mindset, okay? Moving on, anybody else got anything out of there that they would like to chime in on before we move on? At the end of that meeting, you would be surprised that Robert left agreeing to no longer accept money as payment. In that meeting, Rich Dad, now remember, Robert went in to complain and get a raise. He thought he was at least worth 25 cents an hour, okay? But he left agreeing to accept $0 and 0 cents. And he did not tell his father. He did not tell his father because he knew if he told his father that he had agreed to work for $0, that he wouldn't understand. Robert was already learning the lesson. And here's what happens, folks. I'm gonna tell you this. I'm gonna have to turn my book down. I'm gonna look at you right here in this camera and tell you this as good as I can tell you. He said it in the book. Your brain, when it knows that you have a paycheck coming, shuts down. All you have to do is go through the motions, go through work, go to work, show up, clock in, come home, go to work. You don't have to think creatively about that. You know your mortgage is gonna be paid if you do that. So your brain, one of the most powerful computers in the whole world, our brains, we don't even use the capacity of our brains that we should. All of us have been gifted with so many talents that we do not employ because we are in zombie mode, okay? Go to work, get your check, get paid, deal with a couple of problems. Go to work, get check, get paid, deal with the problems. Go to work, get check, get paid, deal with the problems, okay? We never truly begin to live that passion-filled, that purpose-filled, that exotic life, the things that we have, the things that we want to do for our society, our community, and whatever. We don't do that because we get stuck in this thing called the rat race, okay? So back to the camera. When, from self-employed, 10 years, okay? Single mom, 4 kids. When you don't have a guaranteed check, there's this thing in your brain that turns on. It's like a flight or fear of flight response, I think is the only thing I can attribute it to. Because when you know that you do not have a check to rely upon, you start coming up with all kinds of crazy ideas. Now, some of us come up with crazy illegal ideas. That ain't me. I enjoy my freedom, okay? Others of us come up with crazy creative ideas. Notary Nerds University. Notary Nerds University was birthed out of the fact that in December of 2020, I had a $14,000 real estate transaction that got postponed. That $14,000 was supposed to pay my December rent, my December mortgage, my January mortgage, my February, okay? But when it didn't, guess what? I didn't have a paycheck that was coming. So I had to figure something out. That's what I'm talking about. Your brain will not do that. If I had got that $14,000 commission in December, Notary Nerds wouldn't have started. I can guarantee you. Because I would have had no sense of urgency for the finances. But because I had a sense of urgency for the finances, you better believe, let me tell you something. One thing I've learned about me is when there is no way, and it looks like there is no way, God has gifted me something in my brain, and he's gifted it to you too, that comes up with the wildest ideas, okay? And you're like, where did that even come from? It's because just like any muscle, if you don't exercise it, it atrophies. And when you have a steady paycheck, your brain atrophies. It doesn't have to think about anything else. You're too tired at the end of the day to think about anything else. That's why you get stuck. So when you are thinking, should I step out on this thing and this venture and leave this comfort? You always want to do things and be, you want to be smart about things. I never tell anybody just to jump into the middle of the ocean and you don't know how to swim. You have a planned approach that you can make towards your transition. But let me tell you, unless you do that transition, and I have one more thing and we'll get back on the book. I have an issue with people that call themselves entrepreneurs, but they work full time. I have an issue with people who call themselves entrepreneurs, but you working full time. The definition of the word entrepreneur is one who takes risk. If you're working full time, you are a budding entrepreneur. You're probably saving and getting ready for making that ... But baby, if you are working full time, an entrepreneur, you are not. You are an employee with a side hustle, okay? And I take that personally when I hear people say that. Because why? Because I have not had a check. And an entrepreneur doesn't have a check. They have to creatively get one, right? And that's what he was teaching him. So he said, no longer am I going to pay you. I want you to come to work for me for free. And guess what happened to that 9-year-old boy's brain? That next Saturday or the Saturday after that, he was sitting there working for free. And he noticed something. That something that he noticed had been happening the entire time he'd been working at the store with Mrs. Martin. But this time, for some reason, he noticed something. And the something that he noticed was Miss Martin was tearing off the half page, the front half, the top half of the comic strip book. And he asked her, Mrs. Martin, why are you doing that? He's seen her do it before, tossed the comic book into a bin, but he was confused. Why are you doing that? And she says, well, when the gentleman brings us the new comics, we use the old comic tear off as a credit for those that we didn't sell. And he says, and then the 9-year-old Robert says, well, what happens with these other books? And he talked to the distributor. He says, well, can I have these books? And he says, sure, so long as you do not resell them. Well, that illustrates the point. When you have a paycheck, he was getting paid. He saw Miss Martin tearing these pages up the entire time he was getting the 10 cents. But it didn't dawn, the opportunity didn't dawn upon him until he stopped getting paid. Somebody say amen to that, okay? You have to get out of your comfort zone in order for that risk ion or risk synapse or whatever that is in your brain that we all have been gifted by God to turn on. Anybody a mom? Anybody raised a couple of babies?
Oh, okay. Yes.
When your baby started walking and that little thing we do, come on. We're back, okay? Or even a better example, when they stop talking baby talk and you know they can talk, but they still, and we make them, what do you want? What is it that you need? Do you want something to drink? Mommies, hello? Okay? When we force, we do it with our children, but when we come to the career choices that we make, we lose that same thing. When you have a job, it's the equivalent of allowing the baby to go and get what they want. When you have a job, it's the equivalent of picking up, holding the baby's fingers and letting them walk, instead of letting them go and giving them 2 or 3 inches of space. The job is you holding the baby and letting the baby walk. Will the baby learn to walk if you allow the baby to continue to hold your hands? The baby will not learn to walk if you continue to hold and guide their hands. They get your hands and they're holding them and it's so cute, but they won't ever learn to walk unless you do what? Let them go.
Let them go. Let them
Gotta let
go.
'em
Let them go.
Just like your jobs. Your jobs are a plan. You need to be saving money. You need to be very diligent about your budget because your job is a blessing. If you have a job right now, you have got a source of funds for your future entrepreneurial pursuits. You can plan over the next 6 or 9 or 12 months your exit, but you will not realize those things that you have inside of you unless you exit, okay? So he saw something finally because he wasn't getting paid. The thing hid in his brain and he set up a library. He set up a comic library so in Mike's basement or someplace, right? And he charged 10 cents for admission. He went from making nothing on a Saturday to coming up with an idea that generated him $9 and some change every Saturday. And that went on for a while until some bullies got in the way, and then that happened and it kind of went away. So Mike's dad said, that's okay, let's do something different, okay? He took him to and I'm not sure what order this happened in, but he took him across the way and they sat down at a table. He got him some ice cream cones and they sat there and he talked. He tried to tempt them. He tempted them. He said, well, what if I paid you $5 an hour, $2 an hour? At that point, they got it. Because at that point, they knew that if I accept this money in exchange for my work, that thing that I need to happen in my brain won't happen, right? But everybody has a number that they can be bought at, right? If somebody offered you $1 million an hour, you would have to think about that, right? Okay, but what he was the rich dad was trying to show to Mike and to Robert was, you need to get into a mindset that no amount of money is worth the exchange of your time for a consistent life basis, okay? I'm not saying, you can't go consult and this, that, and the other, but the point is, when you have given up your time in exchange for money and you plan on doing that for 30 years, you cannot expect to achieve financial success. And so the kids at 9 and 10 eating that ice cream as it was dripping and the ants were eating it off the table realized that he was tempting them with the money. And it was very tempting for a kid at 9 or 10 in 1956 to be making $2 or $5 or whatever it was an hour. But they knew, based on that recent experience of having learned how to create their own money, that wasn't worth it because they could create more, right? So that right there is one of the biggest important takeaways from chapter 1. Let me hop over to chapter 2. Anybody want to chime in on any of that? Anybody? Okay, go ahead.
I think what was so powerful about that moment with his dad, his I guess poor dad, was that's when I think the official split happened between him and his dad. Like that was the official day in his life where he said, nah, I can't listen to my dad anymore because this is how far he can take me. And to realize that as a child is a powerful thing because you might second guess it because you're a child, you think that's your dad, but that was very powerful.
Very, very powerful. Thank you for plugging in with that feedback because it's right on point. Sometimes we emotionally make attachments to things. And emotion is something that he talks about tells us in the book that we should not be driven by, right? We should not make our decisions based out of emotion. And a lot of us, if we had been told your parents were wrong and teaching you what they taught you, we would have fought them in the streets. Because how dare you talk about my parents and what they taught me? They did the best they could. Don't you ever say anything like that again, right? That's emotion. That's all that is. And a lot of us work and live out of an emotional place, okay? Emotions have their place, but when it comes to establishing financial literacy and building financial wealth, You cannot be driven strictly by emotion. And that's a hard thing to do. It's hard to do in business. It's really hard for us ladies, okay? Women, oh my goodness, we are natural emotional beings. And it's so challenging for us in business to let that go. Okay? And women who have figured it out and let that emotional part go, what do they get called? They get called names, don't they? Okay? Because that's not the norm. Now, I don't believe that every woman that loses her emotional or that lacks all that emotion in business should be called those names. I don't co-sign on that. I don't think that. But that's society, okay? But what you have to understand is that when you begin to make business moves and entrepreneurial pursuits, you can't do them with emotions, and sometimes some people aren't going to like that. But you have to understand that that's their feeling, and you can't change them, but you can just focus. You have to focus on you. Think of it this way, and then we'll conclude, because we're just doing chapters 1 and 2 today, and I think we've got enough nuggets out of that. Think of it this way, for you guys who are emotional like me. I wanted to help everybody in the world when I got my real estate license. I wanted all of the first-time home buyers, people with bad credit. I wanted first generation. I wanted to help everyone because I am an emotional person, and I felt like I was sent to do this, right? I want to teach everybody how to avoid bad mortgage. I just wanted to do everything for everyone. Emotion. Then I realized that if I was going to stay in this industry any length of time, I was going to have to figure out how to make money. Because as much as I wanted to help people, I couldn't do that with no gas in my car. I couldn't do that if my kids were hungry. I couldn't do any of those things without that. And I needed the money in order to be able to do that. So learning how to shift gears and take the emotional aspect and turn it into a passion was the key. And I'm going to leave you guys with this. You have got to figure out, and he talks about in the book, anger is an emotion and desire. When those two things combine, oh boy, you better watch out. Anger, if you could find something that ticks you off, okay, that's not like you want it to be now, and the desire to change those things, right? For me, it's foster kids and it's healthy food. So I have 4 sons, and I'm not going to ever be a foster parent because I can't. The way I discipline, I'd go to jail. Okay. So what I'm planning on doing is to create a place whereby those children who are coming out of the foster care system, they're aging out, because after you've turned 18, if you've been in state care, they just kind of send you on your way. Anger, that's my anger. They're sending these kids on their way to be, you know, sex trafficked and selling drugs and selling their body. Anger, desire. I want to change that. So I combine my anger with my desire to change, and that became my why. Now that I have a why for us that are emotional and want to do nothing but help, now I'm not just chasing the bag. Do you guys understand what I'm doing? I'm giving you a framework so you don't feel like a greedy money mongrel. I don't want you to feel like a greedy money mongrel. Get pissed off about something, have enough desire to change that thing, and now the search and the desire for the money or the pursuit of the cash is not just about you. A lot of us women need the money that we're trying to get. We need that to be about somebody else. Because if it's just for us, we're not going to do it. A lot of us don't take care of ourselves, right? So you can't say, I just want to be wealthy because that's not going to last you long. That's not going to get you down through the tough times. You have to take your anger, find something that you're angry about, have enough desire to change that thing. If it makes you angry enough, then the desire will come naturally. So you got to find something in the world that you don't like, that you want to be a part of changing. That, coupled with the desire to change it, will be your new fuel for your wealth. That is why you are pursuing your wealth now. It's not just to buy a Bentley. It's not just to get a G-Wagon. It's not just to have a mansion on the hill. Now it's a different purpose. You're pursuing it for a different reason. I think a lot of times we women really need that change so that it makes it okay. Because otherwise, we've demonized wealthy people for so long that pursuing wealth seems selfish and very greedy-like, okay? So we have to take it and frame it in another way in order for us to really go after it, really get after it. Now that I have that new framework, it's not just about me buying a big house and having all the land. Now that I've got that framework, there are people on the other side of your passion waiting on you to get off your ass, okay? I'm talking frank to you guys this morning because it's important. There are people on the other side of your passion waiting for you to pee or get off the pot. You've been talking about setting up a nonprofit. You've been talking about but you ain't did anything about it. You're still working your job. You don't have anything in motion towards that passion that you say you want to do. Really? Get angry. Get angry. And remember, there's people on the other side of that passion. So if I'm all talk, what's about to happen with me is all those people that I said I wanted to help, those children aging out of foster care, who's going to help them now? Who's going to help them? If God gave me that assignment, and I know it's my assignment because I've dreamt about it, I've seen it, and all these visual things have happened with me around it. But if I don't take action and change my mindset and stop trying to change those people around me that I'm waiting to get money from, and instead let that thing turn on in my head and go create the money that I need so I can get the land that I need, now the people on the other side of my passion have a chance. I'm on my way, folks. I'm building you a tiny house, folks. I'm gonna have the money to do it, folks. Why? Because I'm taking action behind my passion. When you get angry, come up with a desire, then you visualize those people who you say you want to help as sitting there waiting on you. Things change, folks. They change tremendously. So chapters 3 through 5 for next Saturday is what we're going to be discussing. This is a phenomenal way to shift and shake your mind into reset, letting go of some of the old things, because we all have been, for the lack of a better term, indoctrinated. If you went to public school in the United States of America, you have, my friends, been indoctrinated. Indoctrination is not necessarily always a bad thing, but you have to come to that reality first, okay? Is that you have been indoctrinated. You've been indoctrinated with work hard for a long time, and eventually you'll get the gold watch, okay? So we've got to take that onion and peel that joker back, and you do that one book at a time. Thank you very much for joining the Rich Dad Poor Dad discussion this morning. I will see you guys next Saturday at 9 o'clock for chapters 3 through 5. You guys go and have a great Saturday.
Thank you. You too.
You're welcome.
Great discussion.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yes, wonderful.